The name I couldn't remember. I missed my son's birth because I was passed out drunk at my buddy's bachelor party. Let me say that again, so it really sinks in. I missed the moment my child came into this world because I chose alcohol over being there for my wife and my baby. When I finally dragged myself to the hospital, still reeking of whiskey and shame, Elaine looked at me with exhaustion in her eyes. Not anger, exhaustion. Like she'd already spent all her energy on something more important than being mad at me. "The baby's healthy," she said flatly. "Already named him." My heart started racing. "Oh yeah? What did we decide on?" She stared at me for a long moment. What we agreed on, obviously. I nodded like I remembered. Like I'd been there for all those conversations. Like I hadn't spent the last 9 months in an alcohol-fueled haze. But the truth was, I had absolutely no idea what we'd named our son. We'd thrown around dozens of names during the pregnancy, but we'd never actually settled on one. At least, not that I could remember. The shame hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't ask her what the name was without admitting I'd been too drunk to remember our conversations. Without admitting that I'd failed as a father before I'd even started. So I made a decision right there in that hospital room. I would figure this out myself. The nurses were no help. They just kept calling him baby, or your son. I tried every trick I could think of. When a nurse came in to check on him, I announced loudly, "I'm going to get coffee for everyone. One for me, one for Elaine, and one for..." I trailed off, hoping someone would fill in the blank. The nurse just laughed. "That's sweet, but he's too young for coffee." Strike one. Back at home, I turned into a detective in my own house. I checked the nursery first. The letters on the wall spelled out DREAM, not a name. Just some motivational thing Elaine had put up. I opened every card, every gift. They all said things like, "Welcome, little one," or "Congratulations." Nothing specific. I even opened sealed envelopes, desperately hoping someone had written the name inside. Just gift receipts. When my mother visited, I tried to be subtle. "You know what's funny? His name means..." I paused, waiting for her to explain the meaning. She smiled and kissed his forehead. "Oh, honey, all names mean something. Thanks, Mom. Super helpful." I called the pediatrician's office, pretending to be confused about appointment times. "I have Tuesday down for..." "Sorry, I can't read my own handwriting here." The receptionist didn't miss a beat. "Yes, Tuesday at 2 for your son." Click, I was getting desperate. I actually created a fake email account and sent Elaine a message pretending to be a photographer offering free newborn photos. I asked her to confirm the baby's name for the session. She never replied, but that night at dinner, she gave me this weird look and asked if I'd gotten any strange emails lately. My stomach dropped. She knew. Then I found something. The daycare registration forms had a J as the first initial. My heart started racing. Finally, a clue! I spent the entire night making a list of every J name I could think of. Jacob, Joshua, James, Jack, Jude, Julian, Joseph, Jeremy, Jason. The list went on and on. The next day, I tested Elaine. "You know, I was thinking about other J names I liked." She cut me off. "We already chose." And she walked away. I tried recording her secretly when she was on the phone, thinking maybe she'd say it to someone. But she only called him my love and sweet boy. When her sister called and I heard Elaine spelling something out loud, I held my breath. Pacifir. I'd been hiding behind the door for nothing. I told my friend I wanted to buy one of those wooden name puzzles. "Where'd you get yours for your kids?" He gave me the website. "Just type in the name when you order." "Right, but how many letters should I order?" "You know, to be safe." He looked at me like I was insane. "However many are in your son's name, man." And he changed the subject. I tried asking Elaine's mom to text me the baby's information for insurance, claiming my phone had deleted everything. She sent back his birthday, weight, and length, but only called him my perfect grandson. When I said she forgot the name, she replied, "You have that part, silly." I was losing my mind. I pretended to have a dream where the baby was older. I told Elaine. He came up to me and said, "Hi, Dad." But I woke up before he said his name. She just mumbled, "Dreams about the future are meaningless," and went back to sleep. At the bank, I said I wanted to open a college fund, but had forgotten the social security card. "Can you look it up by name?" I asked hopefully. "We'll need the card," the teller said. "Come back when you have it." I even tried asking the baby directly when we were alone. I went through every J name I could think of, watching his face for some kind of reaction. "Are you James?" "Jacob, Joshua." He just stared at me with those unfocused newborn eyes. I felt absolutely insane talking to a 3-week-old, like he could somehow tell me his own name. 3 weeks passed. All I knew was that his name started with J. I was actually considering hiring a private investigator to find out what my own son was called. Let that sink in for a moment. I tried one last trick. I told Elaine I'd run into someone from high school who had a son with the same name as ours. "What are the odds, right?" I said, hoping she'd engage. "Pretty good, since it's a common name," she replied. But still. She didn't say what it was. I finally broke. I couldn't take it anymore. I admitted to her that I couldn't remember what we'd decided to name him. Her face went completely cold. "I've known all along that you didn't remember," she said quietly. "Because you were drunk the entire 3rd trimester." My blood ran cold. "Since you chose alcohol over our family," she continued, "I named him myself." "While you were passed out at that party, the birth certificate is in my jewelry box." My hands shook as I walked to the bedroom. I found the certificate folded inside her jewelry box and opened it with trembling fingers. I had to read the name 3 times because I couldn't believe what she'd done. Jameson on my son's name was Jameson. Like the whiskey, the exact brand I'd been drinking when I missed his birth. The bottle I'd been clutching every night for months. My legs went weak. I had to sit down on the bed because this couldn't be real. She'd named our baby after the alcohol that had destroyed everything. I looked at the certificate again. Jameson Michael, with her last name, not mine. I walked back to the living room where Elaine sat on the couch with her arms crossed. She looked up at me, and there was no surprise on her face. Just this tired anger I'd never seen before. "Now you know," she said quietly. "You named him after whiskey." My voice cracked. She nodded slowly. "The nurse asked for a name while you were passed out at that hotel." I looked at my phone, at the newsfeed showing your buddy posting videos of you doing shots. Jameson was the bottle in your hand in every single video. So I figured it was fitting since you chose it over us. I tried to sit down, but she held up her hand. "This is cruel to him," I said. "Kids will make fun of him. He'll hate us when he finds out." She laughed, this bitter, hollow sound. "You already gave him an absent father. What's a difficult name compared to that?" Then she started counting on her fingers. Each item hit me like a physical blow. "Remember the 20-week ultrasound you missed because you were too hungover? The birthing class you slept through drunk? The baby shower you left early to meet your drinking buddies? Every morning you couldn't feel him kick because you were throwing up in the bathroom?" I remembered all of it, or at least the parts I wasn't blacked out for. "The name stays as accountability," she said. "For both of us. Me for staying with you this long, and you for everything you chose over your family." I dropped to my knees right there on the living room floor. I wasn't too proud to cry. "Please let me fix this. I'll pay for everything to change it legally. I'll do all the paperwork." She shook her head before I even finished. "You can't even remember to pay the electric bill sober. Why would I trust you with legal documents?" She stood up and walked toward the hallway. The name stays. That night, she put my pillow and a blanket in the den and pointed at the pull-out couch. I didn't argue. What right did I have? I could hear the baby crying through the wall. I heard Elaine getting up to feed him while I lay there, useless on an uncomfortable mattress. Every time Jameson cried, it felt like the wolves were telling me how badly I'd screwed up. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up on sleep. I went to the kitchen and opened the cabinet above the fridge. I pulled down the emergency vodka I'd hidden there. Then I stopped and really looked at it. This bottle, and ones like it, had cost me being there when my son was born. Now they'd cost him a normal name too. I poured it down the sink and watched it swirl away. Then I went to the garage and got the case of beer from the mini fridge. I poured those out too. The cooking wine. The whiskey bottle hidden behind the toolbox. The flask in my car. The mini bottles in my golf bag. Everything went down the drain. When the sun came up, I was sitting on the garage floor, surrounded by empty bottles, feeling sick but determined. I pulled out my phone and texted my buddy from the bachelor party. "Hey man, I need help getting sober." I hit send before I could delete it. 3 hours went by. All he wrote back was, "That's heavy, man." No follow-up. Nothing. I stared at his response and realized we'd never really been friends at all. Just 2 guys who enabled each other's drinking. That afternoon, while Elaine took Jameson to her mom's house, I sat at the computer searching for how to legally change a baby's name. Every website said the same thing. Both parents had to agree. Court fees were $500 minimum. The process took at least 6 weeks. Some states required publishing the name change in a newspaper for a month, and every single site emphasized, both parents must agree. Elaine would never sign those papers. I knew that. I started typing an apology email to my mother and Elaine's parents. I'm sorry I missed the birth, and I want to explain. But how could I explain this? How could I tell my mother that her grandson would carry this reminder forever? Because I'd chosen bottles over my family. I highlighted everything and hit delete. The blank screen stared back at me. The next morning, I drove to an AA meeting location I'd found online. I pulled into the parking lot behind a strip mall and sat there, hands sweating on the steering wheel. I watched people walking through the side door. Some looked normal in work clothes. Others seemed rough around the edges. I turned off the engine and put my hand on the door handle. 20 minutes passed. I couldn't do it. A woman about my mom's age walked past my window and glanced at me with this knowing look. She paused like she might say something, but kept walking when I looked away. I started the car and drove home, feeling like the biggest coward alive. 3 days later was Jameson's 1-month checkup. Elaine told me I had to come to help with the car seat. The waiting room was packed with other parents and crying babies. Then the nurse came out with her clipboard. Jameson, she called, looking around the room. Every parent's head turned to look at us. I felt my face burn red. A mom with twin girls whispered something to her husband. They both glanced at us with this look. You know the look. Judgment mixed with pity. I picked up the car seat and followed the nurse down the hall, trying not to think about what everyone was thinking. The doctor said he was healthy and gaining weight perfectly. On the way out, another nurse said in a sing-song voice, "Bye, Jameson!" I saw 2 dads near the door exchange glances. That night, after Elaine went to bed early, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. I started writing a letter to my son, trying to explain everything, even though he wouldn't understand it for years. The words came out messy, full of crossed-out lines. I promised him his name wouldn't define him. I wrote that I'd work every day to give it better meaning than the pain it carried now. I told him about my drinking and how I'd failed him before he was even born. The letter went on for 3 pages. I folded it up and put it in an envelope marked with his name. I'd give it to him when he was old enough to understand. Or maybe I'd burn it before then. The next morning, Elaine was waiting at the kitchen table with typed pages in front of her. She pushed them across to me without saying anything. Her conditions: mandatory therapy twice a week with an addiction. Specialist 90A meetings in 90 days with signed. Proof of attendance, separate bank accounts with her. Controlling all household expenses. Sleeping in different rooms. Indefinitely with no physical contact unless she initiated drug and alcohol testing whenever she asked. No warning, I signed at the bottom. The alternative was her taking Jameson and leaving completely. 2 days later, I sat in my therapist Melinda's office for my first appointment. She made me go through my entire drinking history, starting from high school. Every party, every blackout, every morning I couldn't remember got dragged into the light. Her questions cut deep. How many drinks per day? How many days per week? When did you start hiding bottles? How much money did you spend on alcohol each month? The answers made me sick as I added them up for the first time. The next week, I finally made it through the AA meeting door. I sat in the back row and listened to people share their stories. Years of sobriety. Day ones. When the meeting ended, a man named Felix came over and introduced himself. He'd been sober 12 years and had this calm way of talking that made you want to trust him. I told him about Jameson's name and waited for the judgment. He just nodded. "Shame is part of the disease," he said, and offered to sponsor me. We exchanged numbers. Call me every morning at 7 sharp. 3 days later, I finally called my mother and asked her to come over alone. She sat on the couch while I told her everything. The drinking, missing the birth, Jameson's name, the silence stretched out forever. Finally, she spoke. She said she wouldn't enable me anymore by pretending everything was fine, but she'd support my recovery. No more family dinners with wine. No more excuses for my behavior to others. She'd help with Jameson, but only if I stayed sober and in treatment. That Thursday, I tried to help with the 3 a.m. feeding. My hands were shaking badly from withdrawal as I mixed the formula. The bottle slipped. Formula went everywhere, all over Jameson's sleeper. He started crying. Elaine appeared in the doorway without saying a word. She took him from me and walked back to her room, closing the door behind her. I cleaned up the mess and went back to the couch, knowing I'd lost more of her trust. Monday morning, my phone rang. HR asking me to come in for a meeting. My performance since returning from paternity leave had been concerning. Projects were late. Clients had complained. They were putting me on an improvement plan with weekly check-ins. My manager would review all my work before it went to clients. If things didn't improve in 30 days, we'd have another conversation about my future there. That meeting destroyed me. I walked out feeling like everything was falling apart at once. The pressure built up in my chest as I drove past the usual turn toward home and just kept going. 20 minutes later, I found myself pulling into a gas station. I went inside for water, but my feet carried me to the beer cooler instead. The condensation on the glass door felt cold under my palm as I stood there. 5 minutes passed. I grabbed a single tall can and paid the cashier who didn't even look up. Back in my car, I cracked it open. The familiar smell hit me hard. The first sip burned going down after weeks without alcohol. The relief lasted maybe 5 minutes before the guilt crashed over me like a wave. I sat there holding the half-empty can, crying in that gas station parking lot. My phone buzzed with Felix's daily check-in text. I knew I had to tell him. I drove home and poured the rest down the kitchen sink, then called him immediately. He didn't yell or lecture, just told me to get to a meeting tonight, and we'd talk after. Then came the harder part. Elaine was feeding Jameson when I walked into the nursery and told her I'd bought a beer and drank half of it. Her face went completely blank. She stood up, placed the baby in his crib, and walked past me to the bedroom. She started throwing clothes into a bag. I followed her, trying to explain it was just one slip. She kept packing without looking at me. She picked up Jameson and his diaper bag. I'll be at my mother's for a week to figure out if this is worth continuing. The door closed. I stood there in the empty house, hearing nothing but the clock ticking. I'm not going to lie to you. What came next was the hardest period of my life. But I want to be honest about the journey, because maybe someone watching this needs to hear it. That first night alone, I cleaned the nursery from top to bottom. Those dream letters on the wall seemed to mock me. Everything we'd planned during those happy months before his birth felt impossibly far away now. The next morning, Melinda fit me in for an emergency session. She had me write out every person I'd hurt with my drinking. The list grew longer than I expected. Elaine, Jameson, my mother, Elaine's family, co-workers, friends I'd let down. Then we identified my triggers. Work stress, feeling inadequate as a father, the shame spiral that made me want to numb everything. For each trigger, we created a concrete plan. Call Felix when stressed. Do push-ups when shame hits. She made me practice saying out loud what I do instead of drinking. That afternoon, I noticed something on Jameson's pediatrician forms. The first name field showed Jameson clearly, but the middle name space was completely blank. My heart started racing. Maybe I couldn't change his first name, but what if I could add something meaningful in the middle? Something that could help balance the pain? I spent hours researching middle names that meant hope, redemption, or new beginnings. 2 days later, I met with a mediator named Desmond, who specialized in family law. He explained that courts rarely approve first name changes without both parents' consent, but middle names were different. Adding a middle name was less disruptive. Judges often approved them if both parents eventually agreed. Then he mentioned something that stopped me cold. Elaine had consulted him 3 weeks ago about custody arrangements. About what would happen if I didn't maintain sobriety. She'd already been planning for my failure before I even slipped. The hurt mixed with understanding. She was protecting herself and Jameson from the chaos I'd brought into their lives. That evening, I made a decision. I would accept Jameson as his first name and own that consequence of my drinking. But I'd propose adding a middle name that represented hope and recovery and moving forward. Something like hope itself. Or maybe Michael, after my grandfather who got sober at 50 and stayed that way for 30 years. Felix called that night for our check-in. I told him about the middle name idea. He listened, then said something that hit hard. Your son needs a present father more than a perfect name. The naming battle can't matter more than staying sober. If you relapse again over this stress, Jameson will grow up without you regardless of what we call him. His words stuck with me. 3 days before Elaine's deadline, she texted asking if I could watch Jameson for 3 hours while she ran errands. My hands shook as I prepared bottles and checked the diaper supply twice. She dropped him off without coming inside, just handed him over at the door. Those 3 hours went smoothly. I fed him, changed 2 diapers, even got him down for a nap. When she picked him up, I had everything organized and documented in the baby log she'd started. She looked surprised, but just nodded and left with him. It was a tiny victory, but it felt like progress. I want to jump ahead here because the day-to-day recovery work is important, but repetitive. Meetings, therapy, learning to be present, learning to communicate, slowly rebuilding trust one small action at a time. The mediator helped us draft an agreement. After 6 months of documented sobriety, we would petition the court to add Hope as Jameson's middle name. Both of us would sign. I would cover all court fees and paperwork costs. At Jameson's 3-month checkup, we both went together. We took turns asking the doctor questions. I wrote down everything while Elaine held him for shots. We switched when he needed comforting afterward. The nurse commented that we worked well as a team. Neither of us corrected her about the separation, because in that moment, we were just 2 parents caring for their kid. The court date came 3 weeks later. The judge approved, adding Hope as the middle name without much discussion. Both parents agreed. The paperwork was in order. That night, during my overnight visit with Jameson, I read him a bedtime story. For the first time, I used his whole name without forcing it or feeling weird. "Good night, Jameson Hope," I said, and kissed his forehead. The name felt like it belonged to him now, not as an awful reminder of my drinking, but as a complete story. The mistake I'd made, and the hope of who we could become. Elaine suggested we try having dinner together once a week. Clear rules about what we could talk about. We could discuss Jameson's schedule and needs, but nothing about our relationship, or my drinking, or the past. Our first dinner was awkward with lots of silence, but Jameson smiled at both of us, and that made the quiet parts easier to handle. After dinner, I went back to my apartment and called Felix for our nightly check-in. He reminded me that progress isn't always obvious when you're in the middle of it. I put my 60-day coin on the nightstand next to Jameson's hospital bracelet that I'd kept from when he was born. Looking at both of them together reminded me how far I'd come, but also how much work was still ahead. Tomorrow would be day 61. I'd wake up and do the whole thing again. That's what recovery means. Showing up every single day. No matter what, Felix always says, the days add up when you're not counting them. I'm starting to understand what he means. My phone buzzed with Elaine's text confirming Wednesday pickup time. I replied with a thumbs up emoji, because sometimes that's all the communication we can manage. The apartment was quiet, except for the radiator clanking. I thought about Jameson sleeping in his crib 10 minutes away. Soon, I'd have him for 2 full days in a row, once the court approved the extended weekend schedule we'd requested. For now, though, I have today's sobriety and tomorrow's meeting. And I have a son whose middle name means something better than his first name. That's enough to fall asleep feeling like maybe I'm not completely ruining everything anymore. I'm sharing this story because I know there's someone out there who needs to hear it. Maybe you're struggling with addiction. Maybe you've made mistakes you think are unforgivable. Maybe you've hurt the people you love most and you don't know if there's a way back. I can't tell you it's easy. I can't tell you everything will work out perfectly. What I can tell you is that it's possible to start over, one day at a time, one decision at a time, one moment of choosing differently. Jameson Hope is 4 years old now. He doesn't know the full story of his name yet. One day we'll tell him. And yes, it will be hard. But we'll also tell him about the hope part, about the second chances and the hard work and the choosing to show up. Your story doesn't end with your worst moment. Mine didn't. It's still being written. Thanks for spending this time with me. If this story meant something to you, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need to hear it too.